Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Green. I'm an independent educational consultant and author at Howard Green Associates. And we are based in Westport, Connecticut and New York City. And I appreciate your joining with me today or looking at this presentation another time on the College Week Live website. I've done these for quite some time now, and I'm happy to take questions as we go along. I'll try to answer things at the end of the presentation, but I wanted to talk today in a broad level about some trends in college admissions and what you might do about them as a student. So please do keep your questions in mind, and if I go too quickly over something you want me to clarify, I will leave time at the end of this session. So I'm going to give you a sense of some of the trends that we've been seeing now unfolding for the last couple of years, and try to do that in a way that will be helpful for you as you think about what you can do in terms of opening up some college options that will work for you. So the trends overview, what's been happening, what's likely to unfold. I've come up with 7 words to think about and help capture this. And these are complexity, uncertainty, diversity, generosity, alacrity, incredulity, and perplexity. These are all TY words, you'll notice. I want to go through those one by one, give you a sense of what I mean by that, and in part cover some of the bigger things beyond your control, as I like to call them, but things you should be aware of that are driving college admissions today, and what you might do about them as we get into the second half of the presentation. So first, in terms of complexity, there's no doubt that college admissions has become as complicated as ever in terms of navigating this process. We have attempted, and the colleges have attempted, to make it easier, but it has not typically, for most students, become easier. It has become complicated and difficult to understand. Why is that? For example, most recently, we had the introduction of the Common Application, the new Common Application online last summer. As you may have read, it was a very difficult introduction of the application. It didn't go quite so smoothly, although things improved during the year. But the Common Application, which is accepted by about 500 private and some public universities, selective colleges and universities, was intended to make it an easier process for students to apply to multiple schools. And in part it has done that. We used to be able to sit down and go over with students one paper Common Application, which you could then file and make copies of, and it certainly made things easier for teachers and for administrators. But the online application has simplified things and made it more complicated. So you will be seeing, if you're a junior now, basically the same online Common Application that will be available August 1st this summer. Assuming a lot of the technology is going to get smoothed out, we know you're going to have the same essay topics, but it's still a complicated process to fill out online. We have things like score choice, which is the policy adopted by the College Board for SAT submission. So some colleges allow you to choose which SAT dates to submit. Others look for all of your scores. Some colleges allow you to choose which subject tests to submit. Others do not. So there are a lot of complications with testing. You've got SAT, ACT, SAT subjects, schools that have become test optional. Again, for you as a student, it gets complicated trying to understand who's doing what and what do you need to submit. Some colleges will take ACT in place of SAT and SAT subjects. Others will not. Some colleges will take AP scores in place of SAT, ACT, and subject tests. Most will not. So a lot of choice, which is good, a lot of different ways to apply to college today, and a lot of different test requirements to help present yourself, including not presenting testing at all at a number of colleges. But again, it's a complex process for most students to face. If you're looking at financial aid, merit scholarships, and so on, as most students today do, it's gotten complicated there. You have the FAFSA form to fill out through the federal government. You have the profile form, which most private colleges require through the College Board website. You have merit scholarships. You have colleges with priority deadlines for full scholarship consideration. So again, we know that it's not gotten easier overall to apply for aid. There is some simplification certainly going on with the FAFSA. We're hoping that it gets easier. It is all online, but you've got a lot of pieces to manage if you're thinking about applying to private colleges, public colleges, and the forms you need to fill out. Early decision and early action plans, as well as other application plans, rolling decision, early notification, another very complicated strategic decision for students. I just met with a student right now in my office, 9th grade, already thinking, where am I supposed to apply early decision? What's that all about? And I would say almost every student who comes in the door today is thinking that they have to apply early. And what that means is a binding application in the case of early decision by November 1st of senior fall. Early action is non-binding. So many different strategies that one can do. Again, for you as a student, it's making it more complex. It's making it more complicated for you to handle. So a lot of complexity in the process. There's also a lot of uncertainty in the admission process. And what I mean by that is uncertainty in terms of where you think you'll get in and how much money you might get to help you afford college, but also uncertainty on the part of the colleges as to who's going to enroll. Partly this is due to a rise in the high school graduating population. We have a historic high of over 3 million students graduating annually in the US. We have more students, about 2/3 of students going directly to college, so greater number of students, a higher proportion. We have a lot more international applications than we used to, particularly for undergraduate degree programs. It used to be that most international students applied to graduate school here in the US, and these days we have almost about an equal proportion of students applying to bachelor's degrees, undergraduates. We have a lot of strong students from many different high schools today. If you look at the number of students, the proportion of students who are taking AP exams, for example, it's widely spread out across the country. You have students taking International Baccalaureate or IB programs. You have strong students able to take a good curriculum at a wide range of private schools, public schools, charter schools, international schools, and so the qualified student population has increased, and it's not limited to a certain group of private day or boarding schools on the East Coast or the West Coast, or certain well-resourced suburban public schools. So all of that is leading to tougher odds, particularly at the more selective colleges, and more unpredictability. So what we're seeing is you're going to, as a student, to defend yourself and protect yourself, apply to more colleges. That means at the college level, you've got more applications for each college reader, and they don't have as much time to spend on your application. So in many cases, it's a much less personalized admission process at many schools. That's leading to pressure to do the early decision, as I mentioned. At the other end of the process, it's leading to a lot of waiting lists. So I've got a lot of seniors right now, and I'm sure you may know some, who are waiting to hear from all their regular decision colleges. And I'm saying to almost everybody, you can guarantee you're going to get at least one waiting list, if not 2 or 3 or 4. There are other enrollment management strategies that colleges are using to try to craft their class, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and so we're seeing students starting earlier and the process being stretched out quite a bit later. Just to give you an idea of some results, this is a block of schools, letters A to B, of some selective colleges. A little hard to read here in terms of how it came out in these columns. But this is a group of both highly selective small schools like Amherst and Bowdoin, so an Ivy in there with Brown, and a public university like Binghamton, a large private university like Boston University. And what we're seeing here is total applications that are really off the charts. Even at a small school like Amherst is getting almost 8,000 applications last year. Boston University getting 52,000 applications. A lot of early decision action happening, and the admit rates dropping. In the case of Brown, you can see there an Ivy level school, 8%, Amherst seeing 11%. And you can also see that the early admit rate, it's again, sorry about the columns here, the early admit rate, for example, at Amherst, early decision in this case, was 39%. The total admit rate was 11%. And so what I'm hearing from students is, well, doesn't that mean I have to apply early decision? Again, that pressure on students to choose earlier. You can see it at At Bucknell, right, the early decision admit rate is 54%, and the regular decision admit rate is 25%. So there's a lot of things going on underneath that, a lot of athletes applying early who are recruited, a lot of legacies, a lot of very strong students, but in part there's pressure to apply early. And we can't ignore it, but I'm also very cautious about students applying early for the wrong reasons. Diversity. What do I mean by that? Colleges, in their enrollment management and in their building of a selective class of students, are continuing to look for a diverse applicant pool. In part, that means ethnic and racial diversity. It means international diversity. It also means geographic diversity. So we're seeing a lot of colleges traveling across the country and across the globe, trying to recruit good students from different places. And that makes it a challenge for you if you are applying to Boston area schools or New York area schools and you live a couple hours away. We know what we call the bunching effect is going on with everybody applying to the same schools. It's good news if you're applying from, San Antonio, Texas to Boston, or you're applying from Missouri to George Washington University in Washington, D.C. That's a plus factor for you. I work with students all over, and I'm amazed sometimes when students that I'll talk with in Argentina or Honduras or London or wherever else, and they are seeing colleges coming to their city, coming to their school to recruit applicants, and these are very selective schools. So there's certainly a search to build a diverse class of entrants, and as I said, many kinds of diversity. And for you as a student, you should be thinking, what kind of diversity do I represent to different schools? It could be diversity of academic interest or extracurricular activity like in art or music or sport. It could be that you're a first generation applicant, highly sought after category of students. Again, racial, ethnic diversity, geographical diversity. I really encourage students not to limit your applications based on whether it's location, your preconceptions about a school. I can't get in, I hear that's this or that's that kind of a school, or sticker price I can't pay. We'll talk a little more about financial aid going forward, but there's really a lot of choice, and one of the defenses that you have as a student these days is to be actively looking at a broad, diverse group of schools that is not your usual suspects, as we call them, too close to home that everybody else applies to. Generosity. Even though we see costs going up at colleges, there's a lot of financial aid available. And most students at many selective schools are receiving some kind of financial support, whether that's predominantly need-based financial aid, secured, as I said, through the FAFSA and the College Board profile forms, or merit-based or non-need-based aid. So there is a lot of financial support coming from the government, state and federal governments for individual students, even though we do see decreasing state support for public institutions, and that has led to major tuition increases at a lot of your public universities. The merit scholarships are often just given on the basis of your application to a school that offers merit aid, and they're looking at you and they're saying, are you in the top 20, 30%, even 40% of our applicant pool, based on test scores, based on grades, sometimes based on some of those diversity factors. And they may offer you a flat out $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 scholarship right off the top without your actually applying with an extra essay or anything else. Be aware that that's an important factor of crafting your list, is to maybe include schools that offer these merit scholarships if cost is important to you. And again, I know that is for most students. I just got an email this morning from a student who's applied to Boston University, and she won a very significant merit scholarship, which she just found out about. And again, she didn't apply separately for this. This was granted to her based on an additional review of her application during the regular admission process, not an early decision application. Build a list of colleges that is a good fit for you, where you're qualified, where your interests will be, you're able to pursue your interests and they will be fulfilled academically, extracurricularly, in terms of your social interests. But try to build a diverse list of schools that might offer you need-based aid, merit-based aid, and yes, potentially just lower cost public universities as well. I mentioned priority deadlines earlier. Many schools, particularly your public universities, but also some of your big private schools that offer merit aid, places like University of Miami or Tulane or Richmond or some others come to mind, that do offer very nice merit programs. Some of them do ask you to apply by a priority deadline. Often that might be December 15th or December 1st, even though the regular deadline might be January 15th or January 31st. So make sure as you build your list to not only look for what is the regular decision or early decision deadline, what might be a priority deadline for maximum consideration for scholarships, and also things like honors programs, I should mention. Alacrity, this word means speed. And as I say, an SAT word not to use in your essay, it's overwriting. But what I mean by alacrity is the process is starting very early. If you are a junior, you should plan to start writing your applications this summer before senior year starts. The Common Application is launched on August 1st, and you should be right on that. The essay topics will be the same as they were this past year. So the essay topics you already know, and you might even start your writing in June or July. We are seeing, you may have had some friends who have seen these SNAP apps, as they're called, also known as VIP, Select, Dean's Choice, and many other kinds of brands. This is when you get an email in September or October from a college that you haven't even applied to saying, you might be material that we're looking for, and we encourage you to just hit submit here and fill out this online application. Sometimes they waive fees. Sometimes they already pre-fill the application for you. Sometimes they have a separate and shorter essay that might be required on the Common Application or their own regular online application. You are not guaranteed to get in with these. It is a way for schools to build up their early pool, and it's a way for you maybe to get an early answer from schools you didn't realize might be interested in you. So sometimes it makes sense. It's not a scam, but we like students to be ready to go with this stuff if they're seeing some of these early applications from schools that they might be interested in. If you're not interested in the school and it's a non-starter, by all means you shouldn't apply. Do you need to apply early something, early action, early decision, or else? And the answer to that is no. Qualified by, you need to be aware, as I went through the statistics earlier, that a lot of schools are admitting a very substantial portion of the class through early decision and or early action. And it can increase your odds at some schools based on whether you really fit the qualifications of that school. So it's not always going to help you, and it doesn't mean that you won't get in regular decision, but I encourage students to be prepared coming out of junior fall, rather coming out of the summer before senior fall, to be ready just in case you might want to apply early decision or some combination of early plans to get some things moving for you. Many students are not ready for early decision in particular, which again is a binding commitment. If you don't know your first choice, if you're not ready to commit, I really encourage students not to overcommit early. When I counsel students for transfer admission and people come in and say, I want to leave this school, go to that school, the first question I ask is, did you apply early decision? And very often the answer is, yeah, I did. I thought that's the only place I could get in. My mom or dad went there. I was recruited for a sport. My boyfriend, girlfriend went there. All kinds of reasons, not always the right reasons. So be prepared for a longer time frame, even though things are starting early, and make sure, if you apply early decision, to really carefully evaluate that it's the right school for you. Incredulity, that means disbelief. Some students, when they get SNAP apps or they get letters from colleges or they get a merit award, will say to me, that can't be a good school. Do they really want me to go there? And the answer is yes, in many cases. It's not a scam necessarily. Is it a good college? Is it really worth it if I go to that college if they are recruiting me? So there's a lot of skepticism and disbelief that I hear from students and parents. Some of it is rightly placed. There's a lot of marketing, a lot of strategizing going on. But there is also a search for good students to enroll. And if a school is the right school for you, you should pursue it actively. There is legitimate wariness and caution about too much debt. So if you are cost conscious, which again, most families are, then you should really not apply early decision and bind up your choices. I tend to recommend for students who are need aware, who are really wanting to compare some aid packages, to apply to that diverse mix of schools in regular decision, and then to think about what the total aid package is that you're looking at in the spring. That gives you the chance to see what the total cost of attendance of a school is, and to be very clear about how much debt you as a student, maybe you as a family, are willing to take on. There's a reasonable amount of debt. Today the average is in the low 20,000s for a 4-year degree. I personally tend to feel that that's reasonable if you're getting a good college education that you're going to carry with you to the future. But you as an individual and as a family should think about alternatives and whether that kind of debt is something you want to have on your plate. What kind of job might you get after college? Is a college degree worth it, even in the liberal arts? Without going at length into it, my personal feeling is yes, absolutely. It's going to help you for a lifetime. There are a lot of ways to look at costs of attendance before you apply and to evaluate schools. So the good news, even with all this complexity, is there are a lot more tools at your disposal. Net price calculators, every college is required to have a net price calculator on their website. It's either on the admissions or the financial aid side of the website. And you can plug in some numbers and see, on average, what you might expect to pay at that school. You can also look at the College Board website and the FAFSA website, that's the free application for federal student aid, and look at their price calculators, among others. You should be looking at individual programs at schools, look at their career services, their retention, their graduation rates, how well are they doing by the students who are there. Many colleges these days, when you go on the tours, you may be seeing some of their sessions here on College Week Live. Many schools are outright talking to families about how are students doing after they graduate. Even the liberal arts colleges are very much aware they need to be talking about graduate placement and job placement when they come in. Perplexity. You might get overwhelmed by this process. Absolutely, this can happen along the way. You might try to look at rankings guides to solidify, that this school is a top-ranked number 1 this, number 5 that, some other quantitative measure. Maybe it's SAT scores. You might have a friend, a mentor, someone at school, a neighbor. When you get in this college process, someone always has some advice for you and tells you what they think you should do, or you should go to their school. You might look for the best financial deal that you can find. You might look for a recognized name, even if it's not the right school for you, because you've heard of it. They have a great sports team, or it's in a great city. You might get influenced by Facebook or Twitter feeds or other social media campaigns or advertising. With March Madness basketball coming up, that often generates a lot of interest on the part of students. I never heard of, Gonzaga or other great schools out there, but all of a sudden they're on the map. What I really want students to try to do is to follow a better plan, really be thinking about what's your plan, students and parents together, typically in a partnership, to figure out what's the right fit for you, rather than just getting influenced by a lot of the noise that's out there. So to transition a little bit, and I see there's some good questions coming in. I will get to those, so please do send them in. I'll get to them in a little bit. But here's a plan to look at, and one that we have talked about at Howard Green Associates for quite a while. How should you approach admissions? What's important for you? There are key factors that all the colleges, all the selective schools are looking at when they're trying to build a good class each year. We have called those the 5 Ps to help guide you here through the process. And the first and most important is program, academic program. Every survey out there, and they're done year to year, shows that colleges are most interested in you're taking selected college prep courses, rigorous courses in your high school. So the first thing that you can do, the most important thing, and this is especially important for the 9th and 10th graders that might be listening, is to take a demanding program throughout your high school years. For students who are juniors and looking at their senior year courses, take the hardest program you can as a senior that you can still handle. So don't overload, But it is important to take a 4-year rigorous program. That's the best thing that you can do from the standpoint of preparing for selective college admissions. You should certainly try to improve over the course of high school. As I said, going light as a senior or junior is not a great idea. I do have students mistakenly think that senior year does not matter. It really does matter, and you can send a strong signal by taking good classes. Another thing I talk a lot about is profiling yourself with your academic program. If you're strong in the sciences, if you're strong in maths, or if you're strong in foreign languages, whatever it is, you don't need to take AP everything to get into college. But you can take advanced courses in the areas that you're more interested in while making sure you're covering the bases that are basic requirements elsewhere. But you can push yourself, especially 11th and 12th grade, to take the most demanding things you can in the areas that might be your best strengths, your best interests. You can also use the summer to try to enhance your academic profile. If you want to ramp up, for example, I'll have students who are in Algebra 2 as a junior and they want to take calculus but they can't get there. Sometimes they'll take pre-calculus in the summer, for example. Try to ramp up and be able to take calculus if that's an area of interest to them as a senior, is just one example. Or you take a class like economics or psychology or something that you just don't have time for, or it's not offered in your regular curriculum, and you take that in the summer or increasingly online. So if you've developed some interests, some goals, that can be quite a strong theme in your applications and can help you to shape your college list. The second P that's related to program is performance. Obviously, how you do in your classes is the next most important thing you can do in terms of preparing for college admissions. So just taking advanced everything and having low grades, that's not going to help you as much. Colleges will think that you might have pushed yourself too hard or just signed up for everything without thinking what your strengths are. So doing well over the course of the 4 years, keeping an eye on the balance between program and performance, it's really a great challenge for students to figure that out. Probably the most common questions I get are around that balance, but do think about where can you do well in which classes. What should you strive for? Boy, that's a really tough question. Again, I get a lot. We do tend to call B and above as the baseline today. And most colleges, most selective, even if it's not Ivy League level selective, most schools like to see students with a 3.0 or B or higher, 85 or higher average. And the closer you can get to a 3.5 or above, the better. GPAs are notoriously difficult to compare, especially if you're in an international school, in a different type of curriculum, or even in the US, you have colleges looking at students who are in schools that have a percentile-based grading, A to B to Z, it's all over the map. So GPAs are tough to compare, but thinking about how you can be in that top third of your high school class in whatever grade system you have, that's another way of looking at this. Keep in mind that the strong courses will always be more impressive than just straight high grades in your basic, less challenging courses. You may be looking over your shoulder sometimes at school if you're trying to take hard classes and you see that there's some students who are doing better from a grade standpoint than you are. They're taking easier classes. Usually that is not a win situation for them from the standpoint of being evaluated by colleges. Colleges will be saying, how did you take advantage of the resources available to you in your school? And what does that say about your interests and strengths? Again, not necessary or even wise to take the most demanding classes in every area that your high school offers. You have to choose, find the right balance for you. Preparation is the third P here. What does that mean? In part, it means being prepared for the entrance requirements of the colleges that you're interested in. So you need to say, well, I'm thinking about applying for this kind of college, this kind of program. What are the requirements? Do I need SAT, ACT? Do I need subject tests? Do I need special courses to get into an engineering program or a fine arts program or an international studies program? So as you're looking at some representative colleges that you're interested in, look carefully at their admissions requirements, and even if you're looking at a special program, maybe it's a finance or business program or a communications program or a pre-med program, what can you look at on the college websites? They're all very clear. What are the requirements you need to meet, both courses you need to take and potentially tests you need to take to get in. Being prepared also means preparing for standardized testing. We do have a new SAT coming online in 2016. The ACT is going online. There are all kinds of changes happening. If you're in strong courses in 9th and 10th grade, be aware that you can even take SAT subject tests that are matched to those courses pretty well. For example, honors biology or honors chemistry could lead you to the SAT subject test in those areas. There's a math level 1, a math level 2, there's a world history. Some of these subject tests that you can find on the College Board website might be appropriate for you in the early grades, certainly 11th grade or even as late as December or January of 12th grade. You can still be taking subject tests if you need to. College websites, again, are very detailed, even program by program, about what tests are required. And what I don't like to see is students that get to December, January, February, senior year, and realizing they didn't take what they needed to qualify for schools they're interested in. I had an email earlier last month from a student who had applied to a couple of schools that required subject tests. She was supposed to have taken the ACT in the fall to cover her, because some schools like a Tufts or a Boston College, for example, will accept ACT in place of SAT and subject tests. She didn't take the ACT, didn't take the subject tests, and is now realizing she didn't have the appropriate requirements in place, and she may not even get an admissions decision because of that. So it's something to look at on the foreside of this so you're prepared. Students whose first language is not English, if it's even in question, you should take the TOEFL typically, the test of English as a foreign language, or the IELTS, the International English Language Test. And so the colleges can see your level of English ability. AP tests, typically you can only take if you're taking the AP class. Some students are able to take APs even without taking an AP course. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but do take your AP exams. In most cases, colleges give you score choice in terms of whether to submit those. Should you prepare for the tests? Very clearly, yes. You will be doing yourself a disservice if you do not do any test prep. You should not do so much test prep or so early that it detracts from your performance in your classes. It's not as important as your coursework, but doing steady long-term test prep is going to help you do better on these tests, and you're probably going to end up taking SAT and or ACT a couple of times if you're looking at selective colleges. Typically that preparation should start for students just before junior fall, prior to the junior fall PSAT. But again, depends on who you are, where you are, what your individual plan is going to look like. But you should prepare. That doesn't mean you need the priciest level of one-on-one tutoring for 18 months. It could be your own prep with a lot of great materials out there. The College Board announcement that they're going to be working with Khan Academy is very interesting to me. There's going to be a lot of free test prep materials available, both for the current SAT up on Khan Academy's website and for the new SAT that they're going to be building. So, and right now there's stuff on the College Board website and many other websites you can look at. There also are some mid-size or mid-level classes you can take, whether that's online or locally. There's a lot of material about these tests, and practice, just like with a sport, just like with a musical instrument, is going to improve your performance and let you know how to manage your time, what you need to know. Passion. What does a passion mean? Colleges, particularly selective colleges, right? A selective college is a school that gets more qualified students than they can admit. So they're in the luxurious position of rejecting 50% or more of the students who are qualified. Even a school that is selective and admits 70% of students, they're still denying 35%, and many of those students are qualified. So once you are qualified for a school, based on your curriculum, your grades, your test scores, what are you then going to present to the college? And that's where they're looking at what are your passions, what are your interests, and what will you bring to the community on campus. A lot of those supplemental questions that you'll see, and I'll talk more about this on the applications, are about what will you do here at our school? What will you take advantage of? Why are we a good fit for you? What are you interested in? So having one or two or three talents, there's not a rank of what's more important. You shouldn't think about it that way. You should think about, what am I interested in? What am I good at? How can I do more of that? How would I pursue that at school X, Y, or Z? So having a passion and developing it over time, not manufacturing it, but being sensitive to what am I interested in and how can I do more of that. That's really the guiding post here. Parents can help students find these passions and put opportunities in front of them, but you can't manufacture something. That's certainly not what I'm suggesting. I am suggesting finding the things, your strengths or interests, finding the things that you like to do and doing more of that, looking for opportunities to pursue that and have leadership. Particularly ninth, 10th grade, many students come in and they're very concerned, I've done piano for all this time, or I've always done this sport or that sport, and I'm really not interested, or it's not going anywhere for me. What should I do? In many cases, it's time to drop things that are of minor interest and maybe try some new things where you might have leadership or take some initiative, and that's fine as a student. You don't have to play a sport or have to do this or that to get into college. It's, again, what are you going to do that is more important. So the rule of thumb should be to do what you enjoy, do what you're good at, and do a lot of it. Don't join a bunch of clubs or just resume build to try to impress anybody. That usually looks like what it is. You want to do the things that you're genuinely interested in. Typically things like enthusiasm and energy, that you're excited about a sport, you're excited about a job, you're excited about volunteer work, whatever your thing is, that usually comes through in the applications. And you really can't create that without a sincere interest, in my experience. So finding and developing your passions is the fourth P. The fifth is presentation. Now, presentation is what you will be starting on in the summer before senior year. How well you present yourself can very strongly influence the admissions decision. Again, when we're talking about selective colleges, we're talking about schools that can deny qualified students either because they don't seem to be a good fit, or they just have too many of one type and they have to make some decisions, or they don't feel the student presented himself or herself very well. The personal interview today is much less important and in fact much less available than it ever used to be. Typically, a lot of schools do not grant on-campus interviews. They may have alumni interviews, which you can do at anywhere around the world in many cases. Certainly in big cities, lots of availability there, and increasingly Skype and other video interview possibilities. So you should interview where you can, but recognize that the interview is generally less important. Exceptions are for very specialized programs sometimes, and in some of your smaller liberal arts colleges. So the key really has become the written part of the application. As I mentioned earlier, the common application being the starting point for most students looking at private colleges and universities and some public universities. You're going to have one main personal statement and a number of short essays in many cases that go along with that. And it's a way for you to give a voice, to give some personality to your application. These essays can be very revealing or not. And I think non-revealing, non-interesting essays tend to become sort of a wash in the process. They won't necessarily hurt you, but they won't help you. But you really should see the essay, particularly that main essay, as an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself, to take some risks, and really talk in your voice about what's important to you, tell a story, give something of interest to the college to work with. There are other ways you can present yourself to schools. You should really think about marketing your strengths, figuring out colleges that are a good match for your interests, and then how do I communicate that to the schools? So that could certainly be your main essays. That's going to be the core. It could be supplementary materials. So today the common application links to, in most cases, a program called slideroom.com. So if you're an artist and you want to show slides or pictures of your artwork photographs, whatever your arts are, most of the colleges ask you to link from the Common App to a separate account on slideroom.com, and that's where you put your supplementary materials. You might have video of you in the theater production. You might have athletic videos that you want to share with coaches. You might have recordings that you would want to share with music faculty. Special recommendation letters from an employer or someone who supervised you from a religious youth group activity or volunteer work. And those kinds of supplements, carefully done and not overdoing it, can also be creative ways for you to present yourself and to stand out a little bit. You should be very careful, very selective about what you send. It should be high quality. The other thing you can make sure to do is when you're going to visit colleges, see the facilities. There are places you would spend time, whether that is a music studio, an art studio, a community service program building, a sport, and potentially try to meet with faculty or others that are working in your areas of interest. It's partly marketing, it's also research on your part to see what the schools offer to you. Writing is the most important part of the application. Most decisions are going to be made by a group, and your writing helps you to impact more than one reader. So the Common Application is your starting point, as I've mentioned. Okay. There are other applications like the Universal College app, and we saw a few schools, including Princeton, add to the Universal College application when we saw the Common Application issues happening in the summer or the fall. And we do see other schools that are using their own online applications, particularly your large public universities, also the University of California system. But Common App is typically your starting point here. Naviance or the Family Connection system, you may be in a high school that is using the Naviance program. Be aware that that is a way that some high schools are managing the process and linking to the Common App through that. That has led to some stress, some glitches, some confusion, and a lot of questions coming up about that this past year. So I'm hoping that gets a little more smoothed out this coming year. Virtually nothing is done by paper or mail anymore. That's good news in some ways because you're not going to lose big packets of information if you're applying from abroad, if you're applying from a high school that doesn't have a great college admissions counseling process. It's really all in your hands. Even the teacher recommendations in most cases are now coming online on the Common App. So you just put your teacher's email in there and they're going to get a little request. Student has asked you to fulfill a recommendation, and they'll fill that out. You'll never see it. It'll go right up online. When you submit your Common Application to a college, those recommendations will go along. Transcripts are going up online, financial aid applications. So that's a nice thing. In some ways it saves money, in some ways it's more secure, and it puts everything in your hands. Colleges have added a lot of supplemental questions and essays that they've integrated into the Common App. Challenge for you there is, at least we found last year, a lot of the new supplements were not available until August or even September in some cases. So you have to get into that Common App on August 1st or just after that to start to see what the colleges are asking in terms of their extra questions. Some cases the colleges were really good about putting those questions up on their own admissions website so you could at least start working on them even before you started the Common Applications. To summarize this here, especially if there are any parents listening, and for you students to know this, the Common Application is very student-centric. So you are going to manage this whole thing yourself. Very important for you to take that role on and to realize that you've got the password, you've got the username. A student has to be in charge of this, and you've got to be really organized to follow up on everything that's going on. Typically, the way the process works is if you file your Common Application to a college, you're going to get an email back from the college soon after asking you to go to another website, which is an applicant portal for that college, start a new username and a password, and then you're going to have an account on that college's website. And then you need to go through and monitor your application on the college website to make sure everything is complete, because that's where they'll notify you eventually of your decision that you're in or not, but also whether things are missing. And so parents don't have these passwords, your school doesn't have them, You are the one who's going to be in charge of that, for better or worse. So this is where I find the process can break down sometimes if you as a student get disorganized or don't follow all the instructions, check all the sites and so on. So again, for better or worse, parents and many school counselors really don't know what's happening with your process unless you tell them. So don't count on the fact that someone else is over your shoulder knowing what's happening school by school basis. You need to let people know what's going on. These are the new, excuse me, let me go back. These are the new Common Application prompts. I don't want to spend too much time going through them. I want to get to some questions. These are available on the Common App website now. They are the ones from this last year, and they've announced that they will be the same. It's a 650 word maximum word limit. So you'll be working on these offline is what I would encourage you to do. Start your writing early so that you're ready to go. And then you'll be able to spell check it, share it with an advisor, a teacher, a counselor, so you do get some feedback, but make sure it's your own work. And then you'll be uploading it onto the Common App once you're ready to do so. And there are 5 prompts here that are going to allow you really to choose what you would like to write about. And I don't want to spend time on this at the moment, but these are available for you already. Conclusion here, and then I'll get to some questions. You can understand the trends of what's going on. I would categorize all of them in the things beyond my control category. You can't control the number of people out there applying to college. You can't control the enrollment management strategies. You can't control the test requirements, but you can understand them and start to navigate them and use these 5 Ps to help you through the admission process with more of a plan in place. Some takeaway lessons for you to summarize. Focus on the most important ball here for you is good grades in college prep classes. So whenever you're hearing a lot of noise going on and myths about this counts or that counts or what you need to do, the most important thing are those good grades and good classes. And if you're not doing anything else, it's the most important thing you can do. Have a 4-year plan, start early, but be prepared that senior year is likely to count for you. Don't underestimate yourself or overestimate yourself. That means don't rule out schools that you think might be too competitive or might be too expensive or nobody gets in there. You might indeed be qualified and have a chance. And you want to assess whether that school is a realistic reach for you, a reasonable reach or target level school, and go for it with a balanced list. So don't underestimate yourself, but also don't overestimate. Don't think you're such a great student that of course you're going to get in and that's a safety school, or you're entitled to get in somewhere, and thus kind of be blind to the changes that are going on out there, which has made the process so unpredictable for students. So keep an open mind, make sure to apply widely, be creative with your list, and advocate for yourself through the process. With colleges themselves, communicate with the colleges by email, by phone, meet the representatives if they come to your community or school, and also advocate with your counselor and your teachers and the others in school who are there to help you. There are people there to help you typically, and sometimes you need to take the initiative as a student to speak on your behalf. Right? So it leaves about 10-12 minutes here. I'm going to get to some questions. I'll leave you a little cartoon. We got a lot of cartoons up on our wall here in the office because the New Yorker magazine likes to do these kinds of things. So there are a lot of great colleges out there. Here's a good question from Lynette. Will it be more competitive to get accepted, let's say, in 4 years? That's a great question. Yes and no. So in some cases, I don't think it's going to get easier. It might even get harder, and that would be at some of the most competitive schools. I don't see the Ivy League level schools, places like Harvard and Yale and Stanford and MIT and Duke and so on. In other words, the most selective, most highly resourced, most quote-unquote desirable schools. I don't think they're going anywhere, or that it's going to get any easier to get into those schools in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We do see population shifts happening away from the Northeast, away from the upper Midwest, for example. And I do think at a number of, particularly the small liberal arts colleges, if you're willing to be open-minded, it is going to get easier. I think there's an issue of paying for college in terms of financial support that could get harder to pay for some of those schools. And if you're able to pay, it could get easier at some of those. We're already seeing that with expensive, less selective private colleges and universities. We do think that it is potentially the ability to pay can be helping you. So I do think some schools may get easier. Some of the public universities where we see um, population declines in some of those states may also be reaching out farther for students to enroll. So some schools may get easier, some may get a little harder over the next few years. Question from Soshana, please go back on how to eliminate college choices. Maybe in terms of list building here. Some schools, I think you should think about doing a search, for example, on a website like the College Board website. Naviance is another one if your school has that. To think about some very broad parameters that might help you shape your college list. You may know that you don't want to be at a very small school way up in the woods, or you may know that you have to be in a city or don't want to be in a city, or only within a certain distance from home, or it has to have an engineering major, or it has to have a swimming program, or whatever it is. Think about, I call them necessary but not sufficient factors. Necessary but not sufficient, meaning there may be some filters, some things that you really want to have at a college, but obviously it's not enough for you. There have to be other things operating. And you may say, if the school doesn't have this program, I'm not going to apply there because I know it's going to miss something important for me. You may keep an open mind and change that over time, but having some idea early on about things that are important to you can help you to shape the initial list. Visiting is really essential. I didn't talk much about college visits today, but college visiting is important both to show interest to the colleges, but also very much for you to make sure you're applying to the right colleges. Too many students apply without looking. They look back in the spring if they get in and they say, why did I apply here? This is just not the right fit at all. So looking can help educate you and help you to see, oh, I really like this type or not that type, and that's going to help you to shape your list. Also, as you accumulate grades and accumulate test scores, by the end of junior year, and certainly by September, October, November, senior, fall, you should be able, through looking at the college's requirements, level of average student getting in, maybe it's through a program like Family Connection, where you're saying, boy, my school, you need a 3.6, it looks like, and 2100 SAT, or you're never going to get in there in the last 10 years. That's a sign, if you're not in that ballpark, that it's a stretch, for example. From Isaac, this is a great question. I addressed it in some ways along the way here. Isn't it better to get an A in an honors or regular class as opposed to a B or lower in an AP class? Again, it's probably the most common question anyone asks me, which means it's very important. It doesn't mean don't ask it. The answer is if it's a class you are interested in and it's an area of strength or interest, and you can get a B or above, then the more advanced class is probably the logical one to take. If it's starting to overwhelm your overall program and it's too much to manage and you're going to struggle to get in that B range and you don't really need that class, it may be too much to have on the table. So it's always a balancing act, very individualized here. I will have students that I say, tough it out in AP Calculus or tough it out in Honors or AP Chem because you need that class. It's okay if you get a C because it's a class that's important and you're showing colleges that you're really challenging yourself, and here's why. So, keep in mind it has to be based on your individual interests and program overall. Question from Cecilia, how's a GPA calculated for a Canadian student? Had some experience with Canadian applicants. You're going to have to look province by province for the different educational systems. And there's a lot of good information on the provincial government level that I found to look at comparing Canadian grades in the Canadian system to the US system. I do find in many cases that the Canadian grading is harder, so that an A or a 95 or an 85 B in Canada is not the same thing as an 85 here in the US. Colleges are going to look at your overall grading, but they're going to look at the school you're in, and this would hold true if you're in a French program or if you're in a Chinese program or wherever you might be if you're another student who's applying from abroad. They will look at your school profile that explains grading, courses, and average grades and other things related to your school. And they will also have an admission person who's trained to review international applications. And that might be someone you can actually talk with or email with. They usually are putting separate international admissions sections on the web pages that can go into this a little bit and have some contact information to get a sense of how your GPA from Canada, for example, might stack up compared to others. Question from Joaquin. Do the international students have the same chance as an American student? Yes and no. Strong international students are highly desirable today, as I mentioned. You certainly are not penalized. However, there is much less financial assistance available for international students. So it is an instance of if you are a full pay student applying from abroad, your odds are higher. If you need a lot of financial aid applying from abroad, your odds can be tougher. It depends on the college, but that's usually the case. So this can be school by school, and you really will also need to match up program to make sure you're qualified, that your high school program qualifies you for the colleges you're looking at. But international diversity right now is a very exciting thing for most colleges. I would say that some of the quote-unquote usual suspects that are your big schools, your schools in the big cities, have a very high percentage of internationals already. And so those might be exciting for you, but you may want to be looking at schools, particularly small liberal arts colleges, mid-sized schools that aren't on the coast, that aren't in the big cities, because those places may only have 4 or 5% internationals and would love to bring that up another couple of percentage points. And that could be a plus factor for you. Question from Oki, if I don't get in, can I find out what was exactly wrong with my application? Usually not. Usually not. Sometimes a counselor can call, a school counselor can call on your behalf and ask if something was missing, something was wrong, any feedback, especially if you're deferred from early action, for example, or early decision. Typically you'll get an answer related to, you know, there was a highly selective school, we had a lot of qualified candidates, we just couldn't take anybody. Sometimes you can get some feedback, but I would say usually you're not going to get much more. Here's a tough situation to be in. If one gets an SAT score of 2380 at the first attempt, is there any value in going for a perfect score? You might have some other folks grumbling right now as I read that question. No, I would leave it alone and move on. If you've got that high of an SAT, you probably missed one question on the whole test, and you should move forward with your grades and SAT subject tests and or AP exams, other ways to show content knowledge as opposed to worrying about 20 points on the SAT. That's a great score if you got that. Congratulations. Should you, here's a question, should you use admission planning services? Admissions consultants, and that's what I do as well. So it's a self-interested answer. The answer is if you feel it would be helpful, if you have the resources, an educational advisor can be helpful for you to identify the schools that are a good fit, to navigate the process, particularly if you don't have a good counselor in your high school or a counselor who's not familiar with the kinds of schools or region that you're applying to. A consultant can give you feedback on your applications, feedback on your strategies, and so on. It's not a necessity, it is a luxury, but it can be a nice plus for you if you need advice, if your family needs advice. So, very individualized decision. You want to make sure to take a look at the credentials and the experience of the firms that you might work with to make sure it's a good fit, to make sure that they have a lot of experience. So. This hour has gone quite quickly for me. I tried to get a lot in for you. Appreciate your joining me and hope you are enjoying the rest of the College Week live session. And thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.